Chapter 3, The Image Maker. It's Up to Me by James J. Metcalf. I get discouraged now and then when there are clouds of gray until I think about the things that happened yesterday. I do not mean the day before or those of months ago, but all the yesterdays in which I had the chance to grow. I think of opportunities that I allowed to die, and those I took advantage of before they passed me by. And I remember that the past presented quite a plight, but somehow I endured it, and the future seemed all right. And I remind myself that I am capable and free, and my success and happiness are really up to me. The Image Maker. The idea contained in this chapter could very well be the breakthrough for you, because image making, once we get a firm grip on it, is a truly dynamic idea. I was speaking in Ohio a number of years ago to a large group of business people when an elderly gentleman in the audience suddenly stopped me as I was explaining the image-making concept. He stood up and informed the audience that he was 65 years of age before he understood this idea. He mentioned that he had read about it, thought about it, and even talked about it, but he never really understood it until he was 65 years old. I want to suggest right at this moment that you read this chapter over a few times, because most people live and die and never fully understand the power of image making. Understand that we are relating this idea to money in this book, but I want you to know that once you fully understand the image making concept, you can effectively use it for whatever good you desire. I am not able to tell you the exact date on which I myself gained an understanding of image making, but I can tell you it has had as great an impact on my life as any idea I have ever learned. For the knowledge of image making eliminates competition from your life by moving you from the competitive plane to the creative plane. You will soon understand, therefore, that in truth, the only competition you will ever have is with your own ignorance. This idea truly excites me. To be more accurate, I should probably say sharing this idea with you excites me, because I know how it can improve every aspect of your life. And I honestly love watching people grow or unfold as new ideas register in their consciousness. But before I delve into this idea, please understand that everyone is using the image-making concept, and everyone always has. In fact, everything that has ever come into your life has come as a direct result of the image-making process. Therefore, if you will only become aware of the results which you have obtained, you will realize you have already employed this great mental tool. Just take a look at the results most people obtain. Generally speaking, you could say it is quite obvious that when they make use of their image-making ability, they almost always use it the wrong way. You are an image maker. Most religions teach that God is responsible for everything made in this world, and I would fully subscribe to this proposition. However, as co-creators, human beings must bear responsibility for what God makes in their lives. The minister and the farmer. A story I once heard illustrates this point exceedingly well. Many years ago, a minister was driving along a remote country road when he happened upon a very beautiful farm. The farm was kept in absolutely magnificent condition. The fences were well cared for. The crops were a radiant green, and although the house was set back some distance from the road, it was abundantly clear that it had a clean, fresh coat of white paint on it. Well-cultivated flower beds encircled the house and stretched all along both sides of the long, wide driveway leading to it from the road. In a neat row along both sides of the drive as well were straight lines of tall green poplar trees, reaching up to a picturesque pale blue sky. The lawns surrounding the house were a deep, rich green, and as well manicured as any putting green ever was. Indeed, the entire picture would have fit well on a postcard, since it was absolutely breathtaking in its splendor. Then the minister looked off to his right, to the other side of the road. Here the fields were plowed, The earth was the deepest black the minister had ever seen, and he was amazed at how the furrows had been plowed in such a way that they stretched out in rows as straight as clotheslines. Far off in the distance, the minister could see the farmer sitting up in his tractor, with a straw hat on the back of his head and clad in an old light blue pair of overalls. It appeared that the farmer was moving towards the road that he was plowing. Since the minister was in no particular hurry, he pulled his car over to the side of the road, got out of it, and walked towards the fence. When he reached it, he just stood still, enjoying the light breeze, the warm sunlight, and admiring the beauty of the farm and the farmer's ability to plow such straight furrows. As the farmer worked his way towards the road, he noticed the minister leaning against the fence. So he brought the tractor to a halt, climbed down from it, and slowly started to walk in the minister's direction. As the farmer got closer, the minister smiled, raised his arm, and waved, saying, "My good man, God has certainly blessed you with a beautiful farm." The farmer stopped, pulled out an old red and white polka-dot handkerchief from his pocket with his big, scarred and calloused hands. He raised his arm and wiped the sweat from his sun-scorched brow, still not saying a word. Then he reached up with his other hand and gently took from his mouth a long piece of straw that had been bouncing and waving as he walked. He stood in silence for a moment, looking at the minister, and then he spoke. With a slow, steady voice, he replied, "Yes, Reverend, you're right. God has blessed me with a beautiful farm, but I just wish you could have seen it when he had it all to himself." Understand that images are mental pictures that are made from thoughts, and the magnificence of the mind lies in the fact that it can think. That is to say, it can tap into thought and create whatever image it chooses. Now play with your mind for a few minutes and become aware of how you can flash one picture or image after another on the screen of your mind. It is almost as if you were sitting inside your body at a great theater, and you are the writer, producer, and director of this movie you are watching. In a wonderful book I read a number of years ago titled The Science of Getting Rich, the author, Wallace D. Wattles, referred to this thinking stuff that permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the cosmos. It's true that thoughts are everywhere, and we can tap into this thinking stuff with our mind and form any image we choose. Now become aware of this truth. Everything we do is preceded by an image. We think first in order to form an image. Then we do the work. Building the first chair. Consider for a moment how the first chair was built. We did not always have chairs, you know. I suppose many years ago, when we first started to become civilized, someone became tired of sitting on the ground. Whoever this person was, he probably started to think and began to see a picture in his mind. He probably saw himself sitting on a thing with his legs hanging down and his back leaning against something. This picture or idea appealed to him because he imagined that it would be a more comfortable position in which to sit. Certainly much more comfortable than sitting on the ground with his knees shoved up under his chin. Since this picture appealed to the person thought of it often, until a desire to have such a thing began to develop. The desire moved the person into action, and with the picture in his mind, he began to build something outside of himself in his physical world that was as close as possible a replica of the image he held in his mind. Once the thing was completed, the person sat on it. He let his legs hang and his back lean, and he found that it was good. He then called the thing a chair. The word chair is a symbol that has a corresponding image, and when we see or hear the symbol, chair, it triggers an image on the screen of your mind. From that day to this, others have been building images of more comfortable chairs, chairs with padding, chairs that fold, and chairs that recline. Then someone got lonely sitting alone, and the person began to think, and they built an image in their mind of a very long chair. They constructed that long chair, found it was good, and they called it a sofa. Need we continue? Someone got tired of sleeping under a tree, and they built an image of a roof over their head. And on we go. Out of the cave into the condominium. We have truly built the world we live in. Columbus imaged a new world, and you and I are living in it. The Wright brothers imaged us being propelled through the air and introduced us to a new kingdom. Samuel Morse imaged himself interrupting the flow of energy through metallic wires and gave us the telegraph with the Morse code. Copernicus imaged a multiplicity of worlds, and now we have been there. And Buddha imaged a world of stainless beauty and perfect peace, and he entered into it. Through the years, history has recorded the results of great visionaries. In fact, everything ever accomplished was at first, and for a time, nothing more than an image held in the mind of the architect. Realize now that you too are the mental architect of your own destiny. Going to the movies. Consider this. Jack Nicklaus, the world-famous golfer, explains he will not even pick up a club until he has a very clear image on the screen of his mind, showing exactly how the ball will fly through the air, how it will hit the ground, and where it will roll after it hits. Nicklaus calls this going to the movies, and he has become so proficient at it that he has become known throughout the world. Fame and fortune are his for the asking. In a previous paragraph, I made reference to the statement by Wallace D. Wattles. There is a thought stuff that permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the cosmos. In truth, there is a thought stuff everywhere around you and within you. So become aware of this truth and tap into it now. Use it to form an image on the screen of your mind. See yourself already in possession of the amount of money you want, to provide the things you need, to live in the style you choose to live. Personal prosperity. You are using mental faculties that everyone has. They are exactly the same mental faculties used by Copernicus, Buddha, and Morse, whom we previously mentioned. You might have formed the habit of thinking that people like those just mentioned are different than you and I. But I want you to know the only difference between you and them or anyone else is only in appearance and accomplishments. We all live in different physical bodies, and we all use our inherent mental faculties in a different way, but our basic structure is fundamentally the same. I'm well aware that there are many professors and other professional people who will tell you what I have just said is a lot of nonsense. But disbelievers like these have always existed, and they are, in my opinion, little people. For all the truly great leaders are in complete agreement with what I have just explained about your equality with other people of the past and present. Even Jesus tried to tell the world, as he was doing his great work some 2,000 years ago, that you too were capable of doing what he was doing. In fact, he even went a step further in saying, even greater things are you capable of. Believe him. He spoke the truth. The little people will say, that is not what he meant. But let me assure you, it is exactly what Jesus meant. If you can see it and believe it, you can do it. Napoleon Hill spent almost his entire life studying 500 of the world's greatest achievers, and the essence of his exhaustive studies and writings is contained in his great book, Think and Grow Rich. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Not many people believe this, but the ones who do prove it to themselves. Why don't you prove it to yourself now? Just build the image of prosperity on the screen of your mind and watch what happens. Remember, though, regardless of how tough things get, you must continue to hold the picture of personal prosperity. You will very likely run up against a series of circumstances that will, for a time, almost have you convinced you are actually going backwards. But persistence is the key. Continue to hold the picture of personal prosperity and understand that what is happening to you is what must happen to prepare you to receive the good you desire. Persistence. Napoleon Hill devoted an entire chapter in Think and Grow Rich to persistence. In that chapter, he said, there may be no heroic connotation to the word persistence, but the character is to the quality of man what carbon is to steel. He'll also point it out in another part of the same chapter that the only thing which separated Thomas Edison or Henry Ford from the rest of the people in the world was persistence. For both of these great men had an image, and they would not let anyone or anything dissuade them. They were persistent. One illuminated the world, the other put the world on wheels. Both were, of course, richly rewarded. In a previous chapter, we explained money is a reward for service rendered. These men provided a tremendous service to millions of individuals, and their reward was in direct proportion to the service rendered. So build your image of prosperity and be persistent. The way for your image to materialize will be shown to you. Persistence always pays. A number of years ago, John Canary, a friend and business partner of mine, was discussing Hill's chapter on persistence with me. We both seemed to be equally impressed with the importance of this quality as well as with the necessity of a person having it if they were to reach any worthwhile goal. After a time and nearing the end of our discussion, we each agreed we would read the chapter on persistence once every day for 30 days. I don't even have to ask John to find out if this exercise helped him. I know it did, and the exercise has most certainly benefited me on numerous occasions. There is an interesting story concerning John Canary which would be very appropriate to share with you here, since it illustrates both the power of imaging as well as persistence. Although I had known John Canary for a couple of years and had talked with him on many occasions, I certainly did not know him as intimately as I do at the time of this writing. It is important that I bring this out here, as I will be referring back to it shortly. The incident I am about to relate took place in 1971. I was living in Chicago at the time and had just completed a speaking engagement in Edmonton, Alberta. When I returned to my room, there was a telephone message for me to call John Canary in Belleville, Ontario, Canada. I returned the call, and after a couple of minutes of small talk, John said it was rather important that he meet with me, as he had something he wanted to discuss, and he preferred not to go into it on the telephone. I asked John to wait while I looked over my calendar. It was, in the vernacular, packed tight. I was busy, to say the least. Almost every day I had either a seminar or a speaking engagement in a different city in North America. I explained this to John and told him that although I would love to visit, I really did not know when I could. John was persistent, so I said, "Listen, I am leaving Edmonton for Chicago tonight at midnight. To get to Chicago, I have to go through Toronto. I'll arrive there at 7 a.m. I'll have to change terminals, and I leave from the second terminal 1 hour and 50 minutes later. I'll be happy to talk to you then, although I don't promise to be too alert after flying all night." It is also worth mentioning that John had to get up early enough to drive the 125 miles from Belleville to Toronto to meet my 7 a.m. arrival. I remember that all John said was, "I'll be there." The next morning I sat in the airport coffee shop and listened as John explained how he wanted to do what I was doing. He wanted to conduct seminars. He also explained he was prepared to pay the price, whatever it might be. As I listened, it was like hearing a popular song on the radio. You keep hearing it over and over again. In almost every seminar I conduct, there is a man or a woman in the seminar who wants to do what I am doing. I've heard it in Biloxi, Mississippi, Butte, Montana, Los Angeles, New York, Moncton, and Montreal. It was an old tune. Now here I was in Toronto with a friend who, as I already mentioned, I did not know that well, and he was asking what he had to do. As I was listening, the same images which I had had with all the others were flashing through my mind. I was remembering all the traveling, the fear of standing up and speaking in a large hotel ballroom crowded with people who wanted you to get them excited, but who were mentally putting you on trial at the same time, thinking, does this guy know what he is talking about? In many situations, such as a sales convention, you had 40 minutes from beginning to end in which to build a rapport with a few hundred strangers and get them excited about themselves. The years of staying up nights, reading and studying, the years of learning by attending seminars all over the continent, the years of working for next to nothing to prepare oneself to hold the attention of a group of people all day in a seminar. These were the images racing across my mind. It had taken me 11 years to get to that point. But how do you say no, you'll never do it, when someone like John asks you? Especially when the essence of what you teach is, you can do anything. Yet, how can you say yes when everyone you know, with the exception of 2 or 3 others besides yourself, cannot earn a living in the public speaking business unless they are a celebrity? And that is a whole different story. When John Canary finished, I told him what I had told all the others. Yes, you can do it, but it's tough. Make sure you understand that, John. It's tough. You will have to do a tremendous amount of studying, because you not only have to know what to say, but you must also have the answers to 1,001 questions arising as a result of what you say. Some of the questions will come from professional people, medical doctors, engineers, and lawyers, who in most cases know what they are talking about. So you not only have to be right, but confident as well, or you'll be discredited with your entire audience. And that only has to happen a couple of times, and you're out of business. You not only have to study these ideas, but you must use them as well, or there will be no conviction in your talks. Not to mention the fact that you will be a walking physical contradiction to what you teach. It is next to impossible, for example, to have a sick person teaching health. You must develop showmanship and voice control, and on it goes. In short, John, for everyone who makes it, 1,000 fail miserably. Usually when this is explained, the person says they still want to go ahead, but you never hear from them again. John was no exception in one sense. He still wanted to go ahead. However, in every other way, he was an exception. I did see him again. I told him what to read and what to do, and he read it and he did it. John read hundreds of books. He devoured them. He narrated them onto tapes and played the tapes in his car at his own expense. He followed me all over the country and sat in hundreds of seminars. He wrote thousands of pages of notes and studied them diligently. Finally, I would have him open and close the seminars. Then he would conduct part of the seminar himself. In the beginning, he would be so full of fear, he would be soaking wet. Sometimes he would be so worried about what the audience thought of him that he would forget everything he knew. And as you know, an audience can be very cruel. But despite all this, he continued. Keep in mind, this was costing him money. He was not being paid. John Canary had built an image of himself doing what I was doing, and he would not quit. He was persistent, and it worked. It always has, and it always will. Today, he has earned the respect of many of the world's largest corporations. He has spoken in almost every major city in North America. He has also earned more in one day than he was earning in a year when I first met him. So if someone with numerous degrees after their name tells you image-making and persistence don't work, just look John Canary up and ask him. He will tell you, I know you can do it because I did it. Philip Nicola, a minister in Santa Ana, California, preached a sermon on a similar idea one Sunday that I was fortunate enough to hear when I was living there. He said, keep your mind on a higher image rather than a lower concern. I realize that is not always an easy thing to do, but it sure pays great dividends for the person who develops the mental strength to do it, and that is what it takes, mental strength. Build your image now and develop the mental strength to hold it. A number of years ago, prior to Napoleon Hill's death, Earl Nightingale condensed and narrated Think and Grow Rich onto a long-playing record. At the end of the record, Mr. Hill comes on to close the record. He said, And now, as I stretch out the hand of friendship through time and space, let me remind you not to go searching for opportunity in the distance, but reach out and embrace it right where you are. Waddell said this thinking stuff permeates and penetrates the entire universe. They're both telling us the same thing. So build your image now, right where you are. Don't even wait until you finish this book. Build it now, and let the remaining pages in this book strengthen the image. You don't even have to try. Just let the image of a more prosperous you float to the center of your consciousness. It's already here, so let it appear. For many years now, I've been very aware of the power that flows through you to accomplish good in your life when you hold the proper image in your mind. And this great truth has been responsible for many wonderful things happening in my own life. Moreover, I have also seen numerous examples of what a proper image will do in the lives of other people. Paul Hutsey's story. I would be remiss if I concluded this chapter without sharing Paul Hutsey's story with you. It all began when I received a telephone call from Charlie Beck, who was the Vice President of Sales for the Southwestern Home Office of the Prudential Insurance Company of America in Houston, Texas. He invited me to speak at the company's regional business conferences to be held in Toronto, Canada. He explained they had 4 different regions, and each region was coming in for 3 days to the conference. This meant that they wanted me to work in Toronto for approximately 12 days. Although I was living in Los Angeles at the time, Toronto was my hometown, where I grew up. My family and friends all lived there, so naturally the idea appealed to me. But I asked Charlie how long I could have on the program, and he said, about an hour. I think it is worth mentioning at this point that I have not as yet learned to teach anyone much in an hour, and I told him so. I explained that if he would give me 2 mornings on the program with each region, I would be glad to come and do the job for him. I wanted 2.5 hours each morning. Charlie's southern accent was interrupted by a real deep belly laugh as he explained they had never done anything like that in the 100-year history of the company. All of their executives had to take part in the program, he said, and so they never gave anyone that much time. However, I stood firm. I gave him the name of a couple of other vice presidents in his company whom I had worked for, and I suggested that he call them to find out if my idea had any merit. But as I hung up the phone, I did so rather reluctantly because I really wanted the job. I must admit that I was somewhat surprised, therefore, when one of Charlie's aides phoned me back to say they were going for it. He also told me he didn't know how I had talked Charlie into doing it. But I was given 2 mornings on the program. I made up my mind right on the spot that I was going to leave these people with something special, and if they chose to use it, they could literally change their lives overnight, not to mention what it would do for their sales records. I was going to speak on the power of an image, or, to be more specific, the power of a self-image and the benefits of holding a positive one. At the conclusion of the program for one of the regions, a gentleman came up to me and said it was imperative he talk to me. He said he had a problem, and he felt I had the answer to the problem because he was impressed with the ideas I had explained during the seminar presentations. There were approximately 200 people in each one of these conventions, and I explained to this man that many of the people wanted to talk to me, but I did not have the time to talk to everyone individually, since I was only one person. I also explained to him that I had another appointment and had to leave immediately to be there on time. Still, he was persistent, so I agreed to meet him the following morning in the coffee shop for breakfast. I can remember our meeting as if it were today. The 2 of us sat down just inside the door of the coffee shop at the Hyatt House Hotel on Avenue Road. As soon as we sat down, he started talking. He informed me that he had to tell me something about himself so I could understand his problem. He said he did not want me to think he was bragging, but it was necessary for me to have this information. He began by telling me he was a good man, and I already knew that about him just by looking at him. I could feel it about him. He then went on to explain he had worked for Prudential for more than 20 years, had been in management for all but 2 of those years, and he concluded by saying, "I'm a good manager." Next, he stated he had a good record, good people, and he was well respected by the executive staff of this company. No sooner had he uttered those words than Charlie Beck and Dick Merrill, the senior vice president from Houston, came walking in. Came over to our table, congratulated Paul on his year, exchanged a few words with us, and then went to their own table. Paul and I sat down again and resumed our conversation. He said they meant what they said, and I knew it was true. It wasn't mere flattery. It was a sincere, merited compliment that Paul had received from his 2 senior executives. Finally, he said, "Now this is my problem. I run a district office in Wichita, Kansas. Out of over 500 offices Prudential has, our office stands in 175th place. Now, he said, that's not bad, nothing to be ashamed of, and it wasn't. It was a fairly good standing. He then said, my problem is, I know we are good enough to be in the top 100, and we're not. Every year I go for it, but I never seem to make it. At that moment, I knew what the cause of Paul Hutsey's problem was. I explained to him that he was letting the sales sheet dictate the image he was holding in his mind. He saw himself as being number 175, and he was doing his utmost to move into the top 100. He worked hard. He worked with his people, and as he explained previously, he had good people. I showed Paul, however, that it was imperative he see himself in the top 100, regardless of what the sales sheet said. In other words, he had to act as if he were already in the top 100. He had to become mentally what he wanted to be on the physical plane. He also had to learn how to communicate this idea to his entire staff. Suddenly, I started to see the lights going on in Paul's mind. We talked for a while longer, and I explained as much as I could about the mind to him, how it worked, and especially about the power of holding the proper image there. Paul thanked me for the time I had given him and returned to Wichita, Kansas. As his region moved out of the Hyatt House, another one moved in. But about a day or so later, I received a long-distance call from Wichita, Kansas, and it was from Paul Hutsey. He wanted to know where I would be holding seminars when the conferences were completed. I told him I would be in Southern Illinois for Prudential's Midwestern home office. He then asked if he could join me and travel with me for 2 or 3 days. I explained to Paul that I had already made a deal with Charlie Beck to do our entire series of seminars for the whole of the Southwestern home office, and one of the sites chosen was Paul's town, Wichita, Kansas. Nevertheless, since we weren't going to be there for at least 6 weeks, he explained that he wanted to join me immediately, and so, at his own expense, he flew some 600 miles to spend 3 days with me. We went together from Litchfield, Illinois to LaSalle, Illinois. We spent hours talking as we were driving from one city to another, and he sat in the seminar and took copious notes all day long. In the evening, we would spend more hours conversing. Finally, Paul returned to Wichita and started to apply these ideas. Specifically, he started to work with the proper image, and as a result, the sales started to climb. For some strange reason, Paul's superiors saw fit to move him from Wichita, where he had been for a number of years, to Pittsburgh, Kansas, where the district office stood in 163rd position. This certainly didn't seem like a very fitting reward for all the effort he had advanced on the company's behalf. Still, Paul accepted the move as a challenge, and a mere 6 months later, the district in Pittsburgh, Kansas, stood number 11 in the entire Prudential Insurance Company. Prudential recognizes the top 52 districts, which is the top 10% each year, by awarding them a citation. The Pittsburgh district had not had a citation in 9 years, but just a short 6 months after Paul Hutsey took over the helm, they were in the top 2%. Just 2 years later, they missed the number 1 spot by a matter of a few percentage points. Today, Paul Hutsey is Vice President of Sales in Houston, Texas, for the Southwestern Territory. Clearly, he is a man who learned well the awesome power of an image held in the mind. If you were to talk to Paul Hutsey today, he would be quick to tell you that he will never let present results dictate the image that he holds in his mind. Rather, he holds the image of what he wants and then acts as if he already has it. Paul Hutsey is, without question, one of the best examples you will ever find when it comes to the subject of building an image in the mind and then executing it. He has become a serious student of the mind, and I am happy to count him among my good friends. Understand this. You could be doing precisely what Paul Hutsey had been doing all those years. So if you are, then make up your mind right now to do what I have suggested you start doing. And start right where you are. Build the image of what you want, and then act as if you have already received it. Expressed somewhat differently, act like the person you want to become. For as Goethe, the German philosopher, once wrote, "Before you can do something, you first must be something." As you finish this chapter, lay the book down and then become very relaxed. Let creative energy fill your consciousness and then mold it into an image of yourself in a much more abundant state of life. See yourself already in possession of what you previously only dreamed of. Become extremely conscious of the truth that your entire being is not only filled with, but also surrounded by, the original substance all images are made of. So do not just keep reading page after page of the book without acting on the suggestions which I have been giving you. In the foreword to this book, and then again in the first chapter, we emphasize the fact that no amount of reading or memorizing will make you successful in life. It is the understanding and application of wise thought which counts. Understanding and application are the keys which will unlock the door to a truly abundant life. It would be very tempting for you to flip from one page or idea to the next thinking, I know this, I know that. However, let me remind you, it makes no difference how accurately you can parrot back these concepts. In fact, you might even be able to recite them verbatim. Nevertheless, if you are not witnessing the results in your own life of the good you desire, you simply do not understand the power and, in fact, the necessity of acting on these ideas. Therefore, make the time right now, this very minute, to build the image in your mind of yourself already in possession of prosperity. Write a brief description of your image on a card. Carry it in your pocket and read it every day a number of times until the image fills your consciousness. Begin your written statement with, I am so happy I now see myself with, and then put whatever you want down there.
I hope you enjoyed this video. We put a lot of good information up here, and it causes everything in your life to get better. If you'd like us to notify you every time we put a new video up, hit subscribe and then turn on notifications. Check out all our videos, and we will notify you when we put a new one up.